Day 1 versus day 4. Same subject, same paint, no undo, and moldy paint. Okay, so here's why this challenge matters. I'm a digital artist, and my traditional paintings are, well, tragic. So I gave myself 4 days with gouache, the outdoors, and 30 minutes each. And here's what actually worked and what didn't. So over the past years, I've been painting digital landscapes, and I can confidently say that I'm better than I was a few years ago. And that's on lots and lots of practice. But I've been wanting to tackle a new type of painting for a very long time, and that is gouache. Why gouache? Well, watercolor runs the second you look at it. Oil needs a whole lot of supplies and knowledge. And acrylic dries a little bit too much like plastic for me. But gouache, that's the sweet spot. It's water-based, opaque, and you can reactivate it. And it also dries super matte, so you get those really graphic, flat shapes. And you can still push the color around on the page. All those backgrounds you see in old 2D animated films, those are mostly done with gouache. Disney legends like Mary Blair did her color keys in gouache. And Avon Earl's Sleeping Beauty backgrounds mix gouache and tempera for that crisp, graphic look. So I learned how to use gouache in animation school, but never from real life. Never with, subtle shifts of hues. And also, that was 10 years ago now. And I haven't picked it up since. But I've been lurking. And I've been seeing the most beautiful gouache plein airs ever. And I want this skill. And I'm delusional enough to believe that I can just pick up a paintbrush and be able to create something like this. But obviously, I cannot. There's so much that goes into painting in real life that's different than digital that I can't even fathom where to begin. I've loosely done a handful of paintings over the past couple of years without any intention or patience. So now it's time to grow up and put time and effort into it. So here are my rules. 1 subject, flowers, maybe a tree, 30 minutes each, a limited palette, outside only, no undo button. And to keep me honest, I'm throwing up my checkpoint scoreboard as a baseline. First, values. Does it read clearly in black and white? Composition, big shapes, placement, where's the breathing room, etc. Readability. Can you tell what it is from 6 feet away? Color control, color restraint, color harmony, color accents, etc. And brush confidence. Decisive strokes and clear details. Day 1. I go out to find something to paint. I'm intimidated by landscape scenes, so I'm going to try to do like a micro scene instead of a macro scene. Maybe a tree, maybe a flower. I'm kind of limited to where this picnic table sits, so I choose this spot right here. I've had to replace most of my paints lately because a lot of my colors were moldy since I haven't used this palette in years, but when I open up my palette again, behold, more mold. So I no longer have red, and I realize I only have this smidge of white paint that's been hugely tainted. You can't even tell it's white anymore. But I'm in the middle of a move right now, and I've already packed 90% of my paints. So I am not buying new $20 white paint when I have some, somewhere in a deep box. So I'm just going to work with what I have. As I'm starting to sketch out my composition, I realize this composition is whack and weird. But I just go with it. I start with a bright wash because that's what I see the best artists do. And then I guess I just start putting color down. I don't really know what I'm doing. Do I start with the background first? It's hard to put light colors over dark ones with gouache. And I barely have white, so I'm a bit confused here. I try to pivot and I paint the tree. I have references of my favorite paintings that have similar concepts open. Remember to use references. So this painting by Justine Thibault has lots of blues and purples and light and dark variations. So I'm trying to incorporate that. I'm not really analyzing where light and shadows go in this piece because I'm trying to simplify, but even then, nothing that I'm painting feels like what it's supposed to be. I'm using a bright blue for this background because once you mix colors together, the colors become dull. So I'm trying to keep all the vibrancy there. At the time, I'm thinking if I make all the colors very pretty and bold and vibrant, maybe people won't notice how janky this painting is. At this point, I'm blocking in this chair and I can't really match the values or the colors or even the ambient light that makes this chair kind of pretty because I don't have white. My brush feels very hard to manage. Do I need a new one? All my bristles are splitting. My friend Hazel Dang always tells me to paint like you're rich. Use more paint than you want with gouache. When you use too little and water it down, that's where it doesn't look good. So I'm trying to use a lot of paint, but I think it's too dry because nothing is smooth. And honestly, this looks like shit. But I'm having trouble balancing how much water to add or else it'll just be too watery. I think it's like a fine art that you learn over time. So in the end, I'm trying to use some dark values to create contrast and bring in clear shapes. But this doesn't even look like my reference. The bush is definitely not doing what I'm drawing, and there's no sky behind this tree. What am I doing? I really wish I could take a class for this. Oh wait, I can! With the help of today's sponsor. Skillshare is exactly what I needed for the messy parts of this painting. I'm working through Bianca Rayola's class, Expressive Gouache Techniques. In the first lessons, she starts with a tonal pencil study, literally squinting to map lights, mids, and shadows before any color. The second I tried to reverse engineer that in my head, I realized that's what I skipped on day one. And this is her blending trick. She mixes two wet colors side by side and then uses a dry brush to mix in that overlap for a clean transition. So I can use that technique moving forward with my chunky gradients. What I like about Skillshare is that it's all creative classes taught by working artists. From art and illustration, animation, photography, graphic design, etc. Like this class on how to kickstart your productivity with Procreate. You learn at your own pace, make projects, and actually build a habit. It fits right into my process. Watch a lesson, try study, repeat. So my plan now, I'm going to try a 2-value study first and use that wet mix dry brush trick for clean. So if gouache is new for you too, this class is a good place to start. The first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So get started today. Day 2. Today I'm going to try to narrow in my focus and paint a flower. Maybe my subject matter needs to be a little bit more precise, and that's why it doesn't look so good. So with a bright pink gouache, I block in my focal point, which is a single flower. And because I realize I can't lighten my painting any more than my wash, I'm going to try a new technique. And that's blocking in all the similar colors, starting from lightest to darkest. So I start with my flower bulb, all the light colors, the light stems, and these 2 paintings from Kate Rado are my main references on how to tackle this. I'm analyzing how she separates her focal point using contrast and negative space. So instead of trying to paint every leaf, she's separating out that focal point and making the background pretty simple. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm layering out all the stems and the leaves getting darker and darker as I keep going, trying to find some color variation by mixing in some blues and then a little bit more yellows. I don't think my shapes are very appealing. I think I'm a slave to my brush, but I want my brush to work for me instead. I'm creating a gradient that gets a little bit lighter and adds a little bit more blue the higher I get away from the flowers. And I think that color variation actually looks quite nice. I think this piece works a lot better than my first painting, but I don't feel like I'm really learning much or pushing myself. I feel like I could have pushed the values a little bit more, lighter lights and darker darks. So I finish up this painting with a few final darks, no details or anything. I wish I could figure out how to add just those few details like in my reference to really make this stand out. Maybe I need to try a different brush. If you know things about painting and gouache, please leave your advice in the comments. I truly need all the help I can get. Day 3, rain. Day 4. So I don't think what I'm doing is working. My values are all messed up. I still don't have white paint, and I need to go back to the basics. So I'm going to try a value study this time and see how it goes. I find this rose and I can only use black and my grain of sand sized white that I have left. I'm mostly relying on washing out my darks to get that contrast, and since my white is mixed in with so many colors already, it gives off this bluish tint, also somehow this yellow tint. I lean into it and I add more blues, so it's more of like a bluish value study. Honestly, I'm not focused at all well here. Do I really expect myself to sit here and paint each rose petal? I'm the queen of lazy. I love suggesting. I hate detail. Why am I painting a close-up of a rose? Especially because at this point, I'm not exactly following the real life values from real life. I'm interpreting it and guessing what it should look like a lazy girl version of a value study. But if I'm not going to commit, then what's the point of a value study? I think I'm way in over my head, and this isn't even basic enough for me to start. Maybe a landscape is actually easier to start with, since you're grouping and simplifying shapes and allowing the colors of the atmosphere to affect every color in the piece, suggesting large overall shapes. I don't know, I've never been taught how to approach plein airs, so I'm really just guessing the techniques and strategies from analyzing other artists. I've been wanting to take a gouache workshop for years, but when there's so many things to learn, how can I choose one thing to dedicate my time to? There's not enough time in the day. I'm too excited to learn everything. Anyway, after 20 minutes of getting upset at this value study, I just give up, and I'm unhappy with the result. Day 5. My past strategies weren't working, so my new game plan is to simplify and stylize this flower even more, using dark negative space to carve out a graphic shape for the flower, like this flower painting by Christina Weaver. And I'm officially out of the teensiest amount of white that I had, so I have to be creative here. Pink gouache will be my white. And I'm gonna make a textured graphic suggestion of this purple flower, even though I can't get this purple to look like the real flower because my red has mold, famously. My strategy is blocking in all the lightest colors and not to worry about the shape, since I'll use darker values to carve out that silhouette in the end. I'm trusting the process here. I'm using a dark green to make those flower petals sharp and jumping between a slightly lighter and warmer green back to cooler and darker hues, trying to suggest all these leaves in the background. These paint strokes obviously don't look like leaves, but the suggestion works. Yes, it's a suggestion of the background of leaves, but it still looks, a little bit more like leaves. In the end, I'm trying to add these smaller shapes and details to add some focal interest and suggestion of the leaf shapes even more. So my values are working. The flower is light, the background is dark, but it's still kind of messy. Are my brushes bad quality? No, I must not blame the tools. I just need to learn how to handle them better. Looking back, I think I could have varied my values so the green is the darkest around the flower and then it gets lighter as it falls off. And I could have defined the background shapes a little bit more. I only have 2 layers, the foreground and the background. It would be nice to have a middle ground of defined shapes. Anyway, after this, I have to pack up my supplies because it's moving day. So that's really all the time I had for this. So I made 4 paintings in a week. I definitely learned more than what I started with, but my biggest lesson is this: new skills don't click overnight. This is going to take a lot of time, intention, and repetition to get anywhere near the artists who inspire me. But here's what I actually learned when it comes to painting. Use big shapes first, and then you go to your medium shapes and then your small details at the end. I'm not sure if this one's real, but for me, I discovered that lightest colors go mostly first, because it's hard to get those light colors once the dark paint is applied. And I need to practice defining my edges with my brush to create believable shapes, but still suggesting those objects better. And yes, I need to find my white paint. Lesson learned. Now it's your turn. Which painting is your favorite? Drop your pick and any gouache advice you have in the comments. Like I said, I need all of the advice I can get. I'm very desperate. So come back and watch me grow. I love to learn, and gouache hates to see me coming. All right, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time. Bye.